Welcome back. And if you're a new visitor, please note that you should see the first part of this presentation dedicated to sleep. We are ready now to start the second part presentation following sleep and dedicated to nightmare and narcotics. Before we go on, I'd like to make some comments and offer some suggestions. In the first part, dedicated to sleep, we have mentioned the following terminology. Should you not feel comfortable about knowing the definitions of these terms, please visit Part 1 or, as indicated later, explore Pandora Word Box. In green are shown terms that are particularly relevant to clinical medicine. In yellow are English terms of general use. You can stop the motion to read at leisure. In the first part, we underscored that the notions associated with sleep are quite complex and that humanity has been concerned with the phenomena of sleep and nightmares since the very beginning of civilization, and so also has been concerned with natural narcotics. And furthermore, we will stress here that with advents of modern medicine, synthesis of opioids and use of alcohol has created a social nightmare. Although awareness of narcissism, narcotics, and alcohol is long-standing and recorded in ancient history, there is no particular emphasis of their association with suicide. On the other hand, as we mentioned in the first part very briefly, the advent of synthetic opioids has changed the situation, and we are living in a society where suicide is epidemic, and so is the deaths associated with overdose of use of opioids, which are promoted legally as very profitable businesses. We have referred to this point very briefly, and we're going to expand upon it later on. This presentation has been inspired by two images or paintings by Henry Fuseli, who depicted nightmares and the terror of nightmares in these images. This then allows us to offer a context for notions or ideas or glossaries in clinical medicine that are not only verbal but visual as well as in written form. And ultimately, these two presentations, sleep and narcotic, is a conduit for further presentations about alcohol. To repeat, in yellow are shown mainstream English terms, and in green, those who are particularly relevant as a medical vocabulary. So, what do we mean by nightmare? Many patients and many works of literature describe the nightmare as a crushing sense or a sense of oppression, very often causing horror, a terrifying experience. This is particularly so if nightmares are associated with the use of narcotics. In Europe, the notion mare generally is related to ancient Slav mythology. It refers to a spirit that takes the shape of a beautiful woman who invades the dreams of men, and as they become seduced, she kills them. And these ancient Indo-European roots persist across European languages In English, to mar means to spoil, to ruin, such as in morbid or mortal. And returning to Ukrainian, morite means to kill, or marno means badly, or marivo means delirium. The roots of Mara nightmare go beyond Europe. Shown here is Buddha being tempted by Mara. She is a demonic spirit seeking to seduce him by visions of beautiful women. Mara is considered then the personification of all the forces of evil, those who prevent the enlightenment of mortals, keep him in the dark. And in any case, humanity knows that narcotics induce nightmares. And narcotic is a word derived from narcissi. Natural narcotics have been known to human civilizations mostly through the Papaver somniferum, which is then a plant, the poppy, that is then producing opium from which one can purify morphine, heroin, and codeine. These are agents that are somniferum, that means they induce somnolence, but not really sleep, but a sleep that is pathologic and generally associated with either fantasies or nightmares. And when combined with the concurrent use of alcohol, which incidentally, legally speaking, is not a narcotic, but medically speaking, it is definitely a lethal narcotic, then the consequences can be tragic. And even if the impact of alcohol is minimal, the ongoing pregnancy, if the drinking is a pregnant woman, is a teratogen, meaning it induces the destruction of the nervous system of the unborn. So here we see then Narcissus looking at his own image reflected in a pool of water and falling in love with himself. And then he chose to drown himself in his own narcissism. So here we have then the chain of notions from Narcissus to narcotic to narcomania. And as stated, narcotics tend to alter sleep, dysomnia, either by inducing insomnia or somnambulism, nightmares, sleep terrors, and suicide. All of these then implies an alteration of the psyche and an alteration of your self-image. Shakespeare represented this beautifully by Lady Macbeth, who suffered from terrible nightmares, terrifying ones. She became a somnambulist and preferred suicide to keep dreaming. So, in summary, the definition of narcotic is an agent that deadens, that destroys, and that kills. The impact of narcotics is on this domain, and these are the manifestations that vary according to the dose and sensitivity or habit of the individual that may develop tolerance as well as dependency. But in fundamental terms, it impacts the realm of fantasies, of delusion, of hallucinations, eventually delirium, coma, and respiratory arrest leading to death. But things have changed since the synthesis of opioids, which make them accessible because of their relatively low price and their legal status, which businesses vigorously exploited to promote sales and therefore their profits at the expense of public health. Shown here is a statistic of death rates related to drug overdoses and is reaching levels that are truly intolerable. For example, this particular family has been marketing OxyContin or oxycodone acetaminophen, and they managed to obtain an agreement by where they do not have to admit guilt and return the billions of dollars of profit which accrued to them by the stimulation and propagation of a lethal brew, synthetic opioids. And then the alcohol industry manages to ensure that alcohol is not listed as a narcotic by adding a simple phrase that if it is used legally, it is not a narcotic. Therefore, OxyContin, if used legally, is not a narcotic. An interesting contraposition against the definitions in the medical sphere. So, what about alcohol? It is known since biblical times that alcohol impacts the brain and the judgment of the intoxicated individual. This is incest, a famous story, Lot and his daughters. Here is an example of alcoholism in Ukraine, a semi conscious individual in a state of fantasy. At this point, he may be dreaming pleasant events, but soon he may have nightmares or not even wake up. And it's nice to shift the perspective to a more cheerful one. We said that sleep is the domain of Hypnos, while his twin brother offers the domain of Thanatos, that is death. But there is also Morpheus who shapes our dreams. And his children Somnus and Phantasos gives us then somnolence and fantasies we enjoy we're almost asleep. Joy, beauty, and hope are the initial stages of intoxication. Daydreaming and fantasies. And scientists used to be very poetic and quite more educated in classic humanities than today. These are butterflies that are known to be the most beautiful and the most diverse, and the scientists call them the Vetus fantasus species, and put that family of butterflies into this Hesperidae family where the golden apples are. So it's a nice way to complete this overview and wish you pleasant sleep, pleasant somnolence, pleasant daydreams, pleasant fantasies, but not those induced by narcotics. I hope these images and verbal explanations, as well as written ones, have increased your grasp of medical terminology and understanding of signs and signals. Regarding the terminology we touched upon, I wish to remind you that these notions are generally extracted from Pandora Wordbox and Clinical Eye Openers websites. And I remind you that you can explore Pandora Wordbox for the definitions of the terminology in several ways, such as short definitions like here, or overviews to know more about the scope of the meanings of particular terms or their origin or word ideas, and the illumination of galaxies, that is, cluster of words that impact each other and collectively increase the significance of each of them. You can see how this is done in part 1 dedicated to sleep. And we have reached the end of this presentation. It is time for me to say goodbye and extend my wish that you visit us soon, in particular short videos concerned with another sort of narcotics, that is, alcohol. Be well.